Salutations, pups! Welcome to Chapter 7 of The One They Call Broccoli by Texiliaz. I'm re-recording this to fix the audio problems. Thank you for your patience so much. The link to the fic will be in the description below. And with that out of the way, let's get on into it. Chapter 7, The Entrance Exam and One for All. Summary. It's time for the entrance exam and for Isuku to accept One for All, but is there more to the quirk than they had originally thought? And how is Shoda going to react to all this? Notes. Hello everyone. Thank you so much for all the lovely comments and support. I am really excited for this chapter. It was actually one of the first ones that I wrote, and I am so happy to be able to share it with all of you. Also, we have fan art for this story now. Please check it out. It's for reals adorable. Thank you to Jorgypunk. There's a link to the fan art. For the sake of simplicity, the entrance exam, as well as Izuku's meeting with Uraraka and Ida, plays out like in canon. Trigger warning: panic attacks, child neglect, dissociation, and crippling self-doubt. Izuku's point of view. It was the morning of the entrance exam, and Isuku was a nervous wreck. Sure, Isuku had noticed that he had gained some muscles while in human form, and Shoda had even commented that Broccoli seemed to have grown a bit over the last few months, too. But would it be enough? And worst of all, Toshi still hadn't told Shoda about One for All. It was tearing Izuku apart, having to keep it a secret from the man. Izuku had enough secrets as it was. He didn't want to keep another one. But on the morning of the entrance exam, Isuku met up with All Might, and he accepted the quirk, with Shoda being none the wiser. Swallowing a human hair wasn't that gross, considering he was used to grooming both himself and Slushy while being in his cat form. But it still felt weird. He just hoped he would get through the entrance exam in one piece. Shoda's point of view. Shoda stood in the examination room, overlooking the exam with all the other teachers. Toshi was also there, standing on the other side of the room and looking very nervous. And Shoda couldn't blame his partner, knowing they were about to send out a quirkless kid to fight a bunch of robots. Seriously, this exam is far from rational or fair. How the hell does any of this prove if someone is of hero material? He tried to focus on all the kids equally, but he felt his eyes move towards the screen showing a flurry of green, and he frowned as he saw Midoriya run desperately through the city. The boy, despite his training, was clearly not on the same level as the other kids. I guess there's always a sports festival, he thought briefly. Shoda was determined to keep helping Midoriya with his training, if the kid wanted him to. Midoriya definitely had a lot of potential. Shoda could see why Toshi had grown attached so quickly. But then, the 0-pointer showed up, and Shoda's heart nearly stopped when, instead of running away, the kid ran towards the thing, trying to save the girl trapped under some rubble. Shoda was just about to tell Nezu to turn off the robot and end the exam. For fuck's sake, there are two kids about to get crushed! Why isn't the damn rat doing anything? When Midoriya suddenly flew up high into the air and punched the giant robot, destroying it with his bare fist. He stared with wide eyes as the boy plummeted to the ground and got saved at the last second by the girl he had rescued. Only when the kid was laying on the ground, bruised and unconscious, but seemingly alive, did Shoda let himself breathe again. What the fuck was that? On instinct, Shoda's eyes turned towards his partner, and although Toshi looked a bit concerned, he didn't look surprised. The man almost seemed proud. Shoda felt his eyes twitch, a bad feeling growing in his chest as he stomped over to Toshi to drag him out of the room by his arm. Aizawa! Where are we going? Toshi exclaimed. Shut up and follow me. We need to talk, Yagi Toshinori, he growled, dragging him through the hallways and into an empty meeting room. As soon as the door closed behind them, he turned to glare at Toshi. So, what the hell was that just now? I'm not sure. I'm just as surprised as you are, Toshi tried, but Shoda just growled at him, taking a step closer. Don't give me that bullshit. The supposedly quirkless kid flew high up in the air and punched a robot in the goddamn face, and you did not even look remotely surprised. You looked like you had expected it to happen. Toshi shook his head at that. No, I expected him to go after the 0-pointer, but I wasn't expecting it to go like that, I swear. Shoda was just about to answer when he heard voices form outside, and he sighed deeply, leaning back. We'll talk more about this when we get home. This is not over, he grumbled, turning towards the door. He heard Toshi sheepishly follow him. Right. Sorry, Shota, Toshi mumbled, hunching in on himself. He heard Toshi giving another sigh. Shota glanced back at the man. Come on, let's go and check on the kid. It looked like he got hurt pretty badly. They arrived at the nurse's office almost at the same time as Recovery Girl. 2 bots were carrying an unconscious Midoriya behind her. She didn't even look surprised when she saw them, and just gestured for them to step inside while the robots laid Midoriya down on the bed. The boy didn't even stir at the movements. Recovery Girl noticed Shoda staring, and she followed his gaze to Midoriya and sighed. Poor kid. Broke the bones in both of his legs and one of his arms. I healed him, but with that damage, he must be exhausted, she said sadly with a shake of her head. He broke his bones? Toshi spluttered, eyes widening in horror. Shoda felt his own eyes widen at that information, too. Yes, All Might. He did, she answered, voice uncharacteristically cold as she glared at the man. Toshi just flinched back from the glare, not saying anything. Recovery Girl sighed again. Anyway, I need to go and check on the rest of the exams. Luckily, there don't seem to be any other serious injuries. Can I trust you to stay until I'm back? She asked them, already heading towards the door. Of course, Shoda answered. Toshi just nodded next to him, not meeting Recovery Girl's eyes. When the nurse left, he let out a visible sigh of relief. I know your relationship with Recovery Girl is strained, but that was weird, Shoda grumbled. She had seemed almost more mad than Shoda had been earlier, and that was saying something. That bad feeling Shoda already had just kept growing. Just what is going on? Did she know something that I don't? Toshi just sat down on one of the chairs and put his head in his hands, sighing again. Shoda frowned and sat down next to his husband, rubbing circles in his back. Seriously, Toshi, what's wrong? I can't help you if you don't tell me, he sighed tiredly. But Toshi didn't answer, and Shoda didn't press further, just kept quietly rubbing circles into his back. It was perhaps 20 minutes later that they heard Midoriya beginning to wake up. Toshi was immediately on his feet, but Shoda put a hand on his arm and pulled him back down, not wanting him to overwhelm the boy. Green eyes blinked open and looked around, confused. Midoriya, my boy, are you okay? Toshi asked gently. Izuku's point of view. Isuku woke up, feeling lost and confused. He heard someone ask him something, and he turned his head to meet the eyes of Toshi and Shoda. They asked him something again, and he just groaned, closing his eyes. What happened? Isuku found himself asking. There was some shuffling, and he felt the mattress dip next to him. He opened his eyes and saw Toshi sitting on the edge of the bed, Shoda standing a bit behind him. You got hurt pretty badly during the entrance exam, my boy, Toshi explained, smiling wryly. Oh, because of the quirk? He found himself asking groggily. Quirk? Shoda asked, and Izuku flinched, his eyes widening when he realized his slip-up. He glanced between the two. Shoda looked skeptical, but also really, really worried. Toshi just looked panicked, like a deer in headlights. At that moment, Izuku decided to do something very bold, and perhaps very stupid. But he'd lived with these two for 2 years now. He knew how much they loved and cared about each other, and Shoda deserved to know. So with the best fake surprised gasp he could muster, he looked at Toshi. You didn't tell him? Izuku asked, putting as much shock and regret into his voice as he could. Tell me what? Shoda asked, squinting his eyes and looking between them. I'm so sorry, Aizawa-sensei. I thought since you helped with my training that you knew. Again, know what? Shoda snapped. It's, not my thing to tell you? Izuku said apologetically, glancing at Toshi. His mentor had shrunken back more and more during all of this. He looked so incredibly guilty. I was planning on telling you, he murmured, and Izuku had to bite back a snort and a yeah, right at that. I don't think this is a matter we should discuss here, but I'll tell you later. I promise. Toshi sighed. Shoda still looked pissed, nails digging into the material of his hero costume where he kept his arms crossed. But after a moment, he just gave him a resigned sigh and nodded, letting go of his arms and dragging his fingers through his hair. Fine. We'll talk later, he said sharply. Izuku felt a bit bad for bringing it up. But really, this needed to happen. Shoda deserved to know the truth. He stubbornly ignored the small voice telling him what a giant and mean hypocrite he was, and instead smiled apologetically at Toshi, muttering out a sorry. The man just sighed again and told him it was fine and not to worry about it. Soon after that, Recovery Girl entered the room. How are you feeling, dearie? I'm fine, thank you. That's good to hear. We tried to call your mother to ask if she could come and pick you up, but unfortunately, she isn't picking up her phone. Is there anyone else we can call? No, that's okay. Mom is probably busy at work. I can get home by myself, he smiled. Recovery Girl frowned at that. I really wouldn't recommend that theory. You were hurt pretty badly, and even if you feel fine, you can still get some side effects from my quirk. With how much you were healed, it is a wonder that you are even up right now. I'm okay, really. It's not that far, and I'm used to taking care of myself anyway, he answered, shrugging nonchalantly. Izuku only realized his mistake after the three adults looked at him worriedly. I'm walking you back home, Shoda stated. What? No, seriously, I'm fine, kid. That wasn't a question. No way am I letting you walk home alone after today, he said firmly, cutting Izuku off. Izuku ducked his head. Yes, sir, he mumbled. Are you also joining us? Shoda asked, turning to Toshi. If young Midoriya is fine with it? Izuku nodded. Good. We need to go and check on some things before we can leave, but rest up and then we'll come and get you, the man said, turning to leave the room, Toshi following behind him. When they were out the door, Recovery Girl shook her head almost fondly. That man, always such a mother hen, she chuckled. Izuku let out a soft laugh at that, and couldn't help but agree. The walk back to Izuku's apartment had been a bit tense. Toshi tried to make small talk with Izuku, but Shoda was still obviously annoyed next to him. It was clear that the man was uncomfortable. When they reached his apartment door, Izuku brought out his keys with trembling fingers, begging to whatever god was listening that his mom hadn't changed the lock. He let out a soft sigh of relief when the key went in and he turned it, unlocking the door with a click. Well, here we are. Thank you for, walking me home, Izuku said with a nervous smile, looking back at them. The two men seemed a bit relieved. Had they seriously thought I lived on the streets or something? It was no problem, my boy. Make sure to get some rest, Toshi said kindly with a smile. As soon as the men disappeared from sight, Izuku went inside the apartment, looking around the place. It all looked the same, and yet different. He noticed that his mom didn't have any pictures of him up anymore. Not that there had been many to begin with, but now the number was 0. His room was also more barren than it had been the last time he was here. It looked even more like a guest room now. Most of his clothes and belongings were probably sold off a long time ago. With a sigh, Isuku picked up a plastic bag and grabbed what little of his things he had left and gathered them up. Just a few clothes and books, deciding to bring them to his hiding spot in the park. As he walked out of his room, he noticed a pile of letters on the small table by the door. On the top of it laid an envelope he recognized. That was his biological father's monthly payment to his mom. For a moment, Isuku considered it. He reached out a hand and picked up the envelope. Even though his dad had left after he'd gotten his diagnosis, the man had never once failed to pay his mom, so she could afford keeping Isuku around. He briefly wondered if the man knew that she never used the money for that purpose. If the man knew any of the things Inko had put their child through. And if not, how would he have reacted if he found out? Would he have come back for Isuku? Would he even care? Not that it matters anymore. I have 2 new dads now. I don't need this one. But still. With a frown, he considered the envelope. This was supposed to go to Isuku, to make sure he was fed and clothed. So would it really be considered stealing if he took it? With a sigh, Isuku looked down at the battered, red shoes standing by the door. They really weren't looking good, all worn out and even having holes in them. Not to mention how they started to be a bit small and hurt when he walked. He didn't want to ask his dads for new shoes. Didn't want to be a burden to them. But he also didn't look forward to walking around UA in those. UA provided the students with their uniforms, but not shoes. Making up his mind, he pocketed the envelope, picking up the bag and put on the shoes with a slight wince. Yeah, they are really getting way too small. Isuku gave one last glance over his shoulder, taking in the space he had grown up in and mapping it in his memory. With a trembling hand, he grabbed the doorknob and took a deep breath. Goodbye, Isuku whispered into the empty apartment, knowing he probably wouldn't step foot in here again. After Isuku had gone over to the park and left his things, keeping the money secure in his pocket, no way was he leaving that in the park. He headed home. When he got into the apartment, Shoda and Toshi were sitting down at the kitchen table. Broccoli curiously entered the room, but neither of his dads seemed to notice him, too engrossed in their discussion. He recognized the story as the same one that he had heard the first day he met All Might. His eyes widened when he realized Toshi actually meant it when he said he would tell Shoda about One for All. Not once did Shoda interrupt Toshi. His dad was simply sitting there, his arms crossed and listening intently, only giving small nods and sounds that showed he was still listening. The further into the story they went, the more tense the room got, until it was almost suffocating. Broccoli decided he couldn't be there anymore, and he went to find Slushy. He could still hear them from the living room, and Toshi really ended up telling Shoda everything. Even things Isuku didn't know about. At the part of Toshi's dead mentor and her murdered pro-hero husband, it suddenly made a lot more sense why he had shielded Shoda for so long. And Isuku was starting to feel really bad for bringing this to the surface. He could feel the tension all the way from here, even though it kind of made sense why Toshi had been scared of bringing Shoda into the dangerous secret of One for All. He could also see the clear hurt and anger in Shoda's eyes. The man looked heartbroken. But nothing could have prepared him for what happened after Toshi got to Izuku's part in the story, and his decision to make Isuku, quirkless, young little Isuku, his successor. Needless to say, Shoda had not taken that part of the story well. And that evening was the first time Isuku ever witnessed a fight break out between the couple. Isuku hid further under the couch as his dads continued to argue with each other. Seriously, what were you thinking? He's just a goddamn kid! But if I hadn't given him the quirk, then he wouldn't have passed the hero exam, Toshi tried to argue. Then maybe he shouldn't have passed! Shoda snapped. Isuku felt his breath hitch at that, his eyes widening and his heart growing cold. What? Shoda's point of view. If he wasn't ready, then he wasn't ready. You can't just throw a dangerous quirk on a kid and expect him to magically become the next All Might. I wasn't trying to. It doesn't matter what you are trying to do, Shoda gritted out. The fact is that you did something that could have gotten that poor brat killed. Toshi flinched back at the word killed, as if he had been slapped. I'm so sorry, he stammered, tears running down his cheeks as he reached out a trembling hand towards him. Don't, Shoda bit out, taking a step back and glaring at him. Toshi immediately backed away and hunched into himself, whispering out another, I'm sorry. Shoda felt frustrated tears welling up in his eyes, and he clenched his fists so hard he felt nails almost breaking the skin. He focused on the pain, trying to gather his thoughts so he didn't say anything he'd later regret. Like how you first pulled this bullshit sob story about how you wanted to protect me, a grown-up pro hero, from this fucked up curse of a quirk, and then right after you tell me you dragged a goddamn kid into it? Don't you see how messed up that is? We were supposed to be a team. I should have started, but was interrupted by a sudden growl that ripped through the air. Both men stopped to stare down at Slushy, who were sitting by their feet, looking visibly upset. The sight of their cat pulled Shoda momentarily out of his anger, and he crouched down. Shh, it's okay, Slushy. Shoda tried to reach his hand out to her, but Slushy just ran off into the living room, meowing loudly. Confused, Shoda stared after her, and that's when he heard another sound coming from the living room. It sounded like small whimpers? Frowning, he shared a glance with Toshi before they wordlessly rushed into the living room. On the way, he wiped away the tears that were blurring his vision. Slushy was lying next to the couch, looking under it. Her ears laid flat against her head, and her whole body looked tense. Shoda slowly sat down next to her and looked under the couch as well, and then felt his heart nearly break at the sight of the little green ball of fluff. The kitten was curled up into himself and letting out small, unhappy whimpers and mewls with every ragged breath. Broccoli? Shoda asked softly, but he didn't get a response. Slushy made her way under the couch and curled up next to the little green bean, purring and bumping against him comfortingly, but he didn't even react. What's wrong? Toshi asked carefully, voice laced with worry. Panic attack, I think, Shoda answered with a frown. I didn't know cats could have those? Me neither, but I don't know how else to describe it. Shoda sighed, still keeping his eyes on the cats. They both winced at the next painful whimper, and Shoda leaned down to try and reach for the kitten. He carefully laid his hand around the small body and gently tugged him towards him and out from under the couch. The poor guy was all poofed up and was staring at nothing with large, unblinking eyes, not reacting to anything happening around him. With gentle hands, he brought the kitten up to his chest, cradling him close to his heart and humming softly, much like he had done that first time he had found him all those years ago. He sighed in relief when he felt this tense body finally starting to relax against him. Broccoli even started letting out soft purrs along with the whimpers that sounded suspiciously close to sobs. Toshi, Shoda sighed, glancing up at his husband, who had moved to sit down next to him. To be honest, I don't know how to feel right now. I'm still mad. No, mad doesn't even begin to describe it. I'm fucking furious with you, and I'm hurt that you wouldn't tell me about this. Toshi hunched into himself more and more with every word, listening to every word. Shoda let out another heavy sigh and focused down on the small, trembling kitten in his arms. But I also know how much your mentor meant to you, and how young you were when she and her husband were killed. So I guess I can understand where your fear was coming from, but still I'm just so fucking mad. I know, Toshi blurted out. And I'm really sorry. I never meant to keep this from you for so long. But by the time All for One was finally dead, it just felt like it was too late. like it had gone on for too long, and that it would only hurt you more if you learned the truth after years of lying. Like you are hurting right now. I was stupid, and I'm sorry, and I understand if you want me to leave. At that, Shoda's head snapped up. Don't you dare give me that bullshit, Shoda snapped. You're not going anywhere. Yes, you're stupid. You're a goddamn idiot, he gritted out, having to take a deep breath just to calm himself so he could continue. But if you think for a second that I'm gonna let you simply walk away after dumping all of this on me, then think again. It might take a little while for me to forgive you, if I even can, but at least let me try, damn it. I still want to try to be with you, even if you are the most stupid, self-sacrificing moron I've ever met. Toshi looked shocked at that and ducked his head, tears running down his cheeks as he nodded. I still want to be with you too. Just tell me what I can do and I'll do it, he cried, looking at Shoda with eyes shining with such raw emotion that it hurt. Well, for starters, no more secrets, alright? We're supposed to be a team, remember? And just give me time. That's all I'm asking. Shoda sighed, letting his gaze fall down to the now asleep kitten in his arms. And as for the kid, there really was no reason to rush this kind of thing. He could have always gotten into general studies and then transferred later in the semester. I know, Toshi sighed. I'm really sorry for not telling you the truth about his training. Good. You should be, he answered with a glare. I'm just happy that I know about this now. I don't know how I would have reacted if a kid with a quirk that made his bones explode showed up in my class without any explanation or warning. Shoda groaned, getting a headache just thinking about it. You'd probably expel them on the spot, Toshi said, chuckling a bit while wiping his tears. Probably, Shoda agreed, a small smile tugging at his lips. Izuku's point of view. When Isuku woke up, it was dark outside, and he felt awful. He couldn't remember falling asleep, but when he woke up, he was lying in bed next to Sushi and Shoda and Toshi. Him and his sister were curled up in the middle of the bed, his dad sleeping with their backs turned to each other on opposite sides of the bed, with the cats in between them. Which was a bit weird. Usually they would cuddle together, and on the rare occasion Slushy or Broccoli slept in here too, the cats would sleep near the end of it. Broccoli blinked his eyes groggily and shook his head while he tried to remember how he got there. There had been a fight. There had been yelling, and then maybe he shouldn't have passed! The harsh words echoed in Izuku's mind, and he felt his throat close up. That's right. Shoda hadn't wanted him to get in. He was probably hoping Isuku would be put in general instead. Isuku didn't know why he was even surprised at this point. Of course the man wouldn't want a quirkless kid in his class. Wait. It suddenly hit Isuku and his eyes widened. Wait, oh my gosh, I have a quirk now! I can't believe it! I can't believe it! Broccoli almost jumped out of his own skin at the sound of another voice, and he frantically looked around the room. But there was no one else there. Just him and his two sleeping dads, and his now awake and very grumpy sister. Sorry, Slushy, he thought, bumping his head against hers in apology. Slushy's response was to push him back down with one paw and purr, telling him to go back to sleep. He closed his eyes. In the back of his mind, Izuku swore he could hear something. There was a loud static, even louder than usual, and beyond that, it sounded almost like several voices. And they sounded really upset. He tried ignoring them, chalking it up to exhaustion, and instead focused on the sound of Slushy purring by his side. Only moments later, he fell back asleep, the buzzing in his head never ceasing. The next time Isuku woke up, it was bright outside, and his dads were getting ready for the day. The air was tense, between them. Neither were talking, and Toshi soon left the room, Slushy following close behind the man to get breakfast. Not feeling like getting up yet, Broccoli tried falling back asleep, but the room was just too bright and his head was too loud, the static having grown even louder. And so, with a yawn, he reluctantly stood up and stretched. "Oh good, you're up." At the sound of Shoda's voice, Izuku looked up to find his dad walking over to him and crouching down next to the bed. "How are you feeling?" Shoda asked gently, scratching Broccoli behind the ear. Broccoli purred at the action and leaned into the touch, but then he remembered last night and flinched away from the man. Shoda swore softly, and Broccoli peeked up at him. His dad didn't look angry, but he looked really sad, which was somehow even worse. "Sorry, do you need anything? Are you in pain?" he asked carefully. After some consideration, Izuku shook his head. "No need to play dumb right now." Shoda let out a soft sigh of relief at that. "Okay, good. But you should eat and drink something. Want to join us for breakfast?" he asked, a sad smile on his paler than usual face. It looked like the man had barely slept last night. Broccoli considered him for a moment. He was still hurt that Shoda apparently didn't want him in his class. The man had told Izuku he'd support him, that he cared about him. But even so, he would still sense something like that when he saw Izuku wasn't there to hear it, which hurt a lot. But the thing is, he still loved his dad, and Shoda still liked Broccoli. He had even comforted him after he had panicked last night. He guessed even if Shoda won't want Izuku anymore, there was no reason for Broccoli to not like him. So with that in mind, Broccoli carefully walked over to Shoda, so his front paws were resting against his chest, and bumped his head against his chin, purring softly and asking to be picked up. Shoda smiled at that and gently lifted him. "All right then, let's go eat," he said, softly, carrying Broccoli out to the others waiting in the kitchen. The air around the kitchen was very tense and awkward. Not even Toshi tried to fill the silence. That's how bad it was. His dad needed to go to work at UA today, looking over the entrance exam and new potential students, as well as getting everything sorted out for All Might's first year of teaching. But when it was time for them to go, they seemed to almost hesitate leaving him. Broccoli had made a show of eating his food and drinking some water, trying to silently tell them that he was fine and to just go. They seemed a bit calmer after that, and Broccoli and Slushy saw them out at the front door. But as soon as the door closed behind them, Broccoli missed them both greatly. He didn't know how long he sat there in the hallway, watching the door. Slushy tried to cheer him up, but he just couldn't bother to move. This form was starting to hurt, too. He knew he was going over his time limit, but he just couldn't find the will to care. He suddenly heard Slushy hiss next to him, and he turned around and looked into the kitchen where she was staring. As soon as he saw what she was hissing at, he too shot up to his feet with a hiss. There, in the middle of their kitchen, stood a pale, translucent man. The man was dressed as if he had just stepped out of bed. He had white hair and green eyes, and as soon as those eyes locked with Izuku's own, they widened. "You can see me?" the man asked, his voice raspy and almost seeming to echo in the room. "Oh, hell no!" Izuku had seen enough horror movies to know that those words were not something you ever wanted to hear another person say. So, with a deep growl, he stepped between the thing and his sister, arching his back and feeling his court light up in sparks. Oh, no, don't do that. Here, I'll just, He heard another voice call out from somewhere. "For fuck's sake, what the hell did you do?" The man seemed to jump at the voice, as much as Izuku did, and without another word, he was gone, leaving an empty kitchen behind. Isuku blinked at the space the man had been in. What the heck was that? He thought, looking back at his sister with wide eyes. Slushy seemed just as, if not even more confused by the whole thing, and she kept growling at the now seemingly empty space. His head felt heavy, the buzzing giving him a splitting headache. This form suddenly became unbearable, and so, with a poof of smoke, Izuku changed back into a human, picked up Slushy, and ran into the office screaming, "I need answers!" He was scrolling through site after site on the family computer. Unsurprisingly, the internet was filled with theories about how animals being able to see ghosts, though no evidence. But I guess what we just saw should be plenty of evidence. But why haven't we seen them before? Izuku asked, absent-mindedly, glancing down at Slushy, who was curled up on his lap. And why would he look so surprised that we could see him? Wait, does One for All come with ghost vision? Maybe Slushy had seen ghosts all this time and it was just the first time for Broccoli? But no, that doesn't make any sense. Slushy had seemed just as disturbed as Broccoli had been. There was that static filling his head, growing louder and changing in frequency. And through it, Izuku swore he heard voices echoing around him. Still can't believe it. Had a quirk this whole time. Didn't know? Izuku whipped around so fast it almost gave him whiplash. Hello? He asked quietly, looking around the empty room. Then, right next to his ear, he heard an amused, "Hello," and he screamed, falling off the chair. Slushy landed on her feet next to him, looking upset at the sudden movement, but otherwise fine. But Izuku barely noticed her because there were several voices laughing at him in the still empty room. No, in his head, Izuku realized. What the hell? He gasped, bringing a shaking hand up to his aching head, staring straight ahead with wide eyes. But to his disappointment, but also relief, it suddenly got quiet, the buzzing abruptly being cut off, or at least silenced remarkably, and Izuku felt exhausted, his head feeling heavy like lead. For a while, Izuku just sat there, trying to calm his rapid heartbeat, until Slushy meowed at him and pulled him back into reality. With trembling hands, Izuku picked up his phone and called the only number he could think of. Hey, All Might? Weird question, but is One for All haunted? Author's notes. The vestiges are here! Most who know me know how much I love the past One for All users. Mostly because, as I've mentioned in previous chapters, I was recently diagnosed with DID, and so, the concept of having characters sharing the mind space with each other, even if it's not exactly the same, still feels so validating, and I simply couldn't wait to bring them into this story. That's right, Isuku is getting 7 more parents, because our boy needs all the love he can get. Sorry for leaving it at such a cliffhanger. I'm sure a lot of you have questions, and hopefully most of them will be answered. I'm really looking forward to exploring the vestiges and Izuku's relationship to his new quirk more, and I hope you all look forward to it too. Only 2 weeks left before my portfolio deadline, then I will have more time to write again. So please be patient and keep being awesome. Thank you again for all the support, and I hope you have a wonderful day. And that is it for Chapter 7. I really hope that the audio is much better this time, and I'm so sorry that it took me so long to re-record it. I was really tired, and I'll admit, I took a nap. I took a long nap. But I hope you enjoy it. Show Texiliaz some love. Sorry for desk squeaking and my lisp and all the stumbles I make. I'm gonna say sorry every time. You guys should know that right now. I'm gonna say sorry every single time. But that's it for now, pups. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye!